Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Bridging the Culture Gap, Series 2, Dreams of My Parents Student Essay Discussion today. I'm Clarissa with Chinese American Museum DC. We are the first and only museum in our nation's capital dedicated to the Chinese American story. So tonight, we are very excited for the second year of the contest, partnered with Calvin J. Lee Memorial Foundation. Through this program, we really hope to promote a meaningful dialogue that will bring our families closer together and help students and parents understand each other better. Our first year's topic was in an open letter format to the parents as a way for students to voice their struggles, questions, and emotions. This year, we encouraged them to step out a little bit more and explore the stories of their parents and grandparents. So in today's discussion, students will share their parents' stories and explore a range of topics based on their essays. So leading the discussion today are our final round judges, Janelle Wang. She is a professor in the Department of Government and Politics and American Studies and director of the Asian American Studies program. And the director of the Asian American Studies program at the University of Maryland. She studies Asian American politics and has published many articles and books on Asian American public opinion. Wang grew up in Yuba City, California, attended UCLA as an undergrad, and received her PhD from Yale. We also have Patricia Chu. She is a professor of English and director of the Asian American Studies at George Washington University. Her books, Assimilating Asians and Where I Have Never Been, Migration, Melancholia, and Memory in Asian American Narratives of Return, examine how Asian American writers explore and depict their Asian heritage and American identity. A daughter of Chinese immigrants, Chu was born in New Haven, Connecticut, grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, graduated from Yale University, and received her MA and PhD from Cornell. Also, we are very excited that two winning students on the panel tonight. Second place winner, Marlena Wu. She's a current student at Wharton Payton College Prep in Illinois. And honorable mention winner, Matthew Wang. He studies at Cherry Hill High School East in New Jersey. We also have other two winning students. They can join us tonight, but they sent us a recording of their story sharing to share tonight. So before we start the discussion, I just want to quickly mention to the audience, you can use the Q&A feature to submit your question for the panelists. And this webinar is being recorded and we will be uploaded to our museum YouTube channel. And all the winning essays, they will also be shared on our website really soon. And now I'll pass it over to Janelle and Patty and to start the story sharing and discussion for tonight.
Wonderful. So we're going to start off with the stars with the shows, the students and their writing. And we're going to start with two videos that the winners sent in and then move on to our other winners to share their story. So we're starting with Kisara Wang, and Kisara is in grade 10 at the King's Academy.
Hello, my name is Kes. I wrote a narrative about my grandfather for the Chinese American Museum Essay Contest. This is his story. My grandfather came to the USA as a paper son in 1951, which means his parents bought him like an identity that would allow him to live in the USA. His main goal was to make enough money to bring his family to America, but he kept facing obstacles, whether it was a lack of funds on his end or issues in China, and he was only ever able to send some money back to his family regularly. Eventually, he realized his goal was basically impossible, and he started his own family instead and tried to raise his kids well. He finally got to fly back to China to see his family 50 years later with his two sons. He worried he couldn't face his family since he felt that he had failed them because he didn't bring them over, but they welcomed him back with open arms because he really did a lot more than he thought, even if he didn't accomplish his main goal in the beginning. Plus, he had raised his kids well, they went to good colleges, they had stable jobs, and they were getting married. I heard a lot of my grandfather's experiences from my dad because he felt that my grandfather had made a huge impact on his life and had gotten my dad to where he was today. I wanted to capture how much my grandfather's actions and strength helped his sons and his family at the village with their own dreams. I found that incredibly powerful because it's a reminder that even if you don't think you made it with your own dream, it's never too late, and there's always something you can do to keep going. I learned of the story in bits and pieces from my dad all throughout my childhood. My dad always had a lot of respect for his dad, my grandfather, and speaks highly of him. My grandfather was always kind and caring to me, and he was extremely hardworking and strong-willed. My dad shares his hardworking mindset, and I can see how it helped him succeed in today's world and not break down in the face of difficulty. I didn't have the same experiences as my grandfather did, and I haven't faced nearly as many obstacles. But we're both still Chinese American, and I'm grateful to him for showing me the value of hard work and ambition. Sometimes the world isn't fair, and sometimes things don't go our way, but my grandfather's story showed me and my dad that we can make the most out of our situations and never give up. Thank you for listening.
It's really nice to be able to share that. Oops, sorry. All right, we're going to move to the next video. And this video is by Benna Fang. One moment, please. So Benna Fang is sharing her story.
Hi, I'm Benna. In my essay, I created a narration of my parents' experiences from childhood to the present day. And in this video, I'll be sharing a condensed version alongside photos from throughout the years. My parents are both from rural China, my mom being born in Hunan province and my dad in Shandong province. While I and many of my classmates only have to worry about good grades, they had the additional challenge of attending to their family's farms. But despite this, they were determined to succeed, and my mother and father both tested well on their high school entrance exams and were able to attend the best ones in their regions. They were the academics of their families, so of course, alongside hard work, their high Gaokao scores handed them tickets to college. In the pictures, you can see my father with his older brother, as well as my mom and her cousins, and as well as her older sister. While my parents attended different undergraduate schools, they met while pursuing master degrees in Beijing Institute of Technology and bonded over shared experiences, navigating the first together as novices to city life. They dated, then married, and then decided to open a new chapter of their lives. Years later, they sat nervously waiting for application updates. Then, their hard work paid off with acceptance into a fully funded PhD program in the United States. They arrived in America rich with knowledge, but with little else. However, they were still determined to succeed. In Louisiana, my parents completed their PhDs and had my older brother, and my father received a job offer in California. Despite the challenge of having to be months apart, they embraced the opportunity. My older brother and my mom soon moved to California, and then I was born. As parents, they saw their son excel in STEM and their daughter look for her passion. Despite her struggles, she is deeply grateful for their sacrifices. Their journey, filled with hard work and determination, has given her a life full of possibilities. Thank you, Mom and Dad, for giving me the life you dreamed of having and for having achieved your dreams.
All right, so those are two of the essay contest entrants, and now we are going to turn it over to our live in-person winners. The first is Marlena Wu.
Okay. Well, hello everyone. My name is Marlena, and I wrote about my mom for the Dreams of My Parent essay contest. So first, I'll start with just her life in China. It was kind of just normal life, as comfortable, and so she went to college and then graduated with an associate's degree. And then her first job was actually as an accountant at Taishan's City Hall. And then she also had lots of friends, even met a guy, which eventually became her husband and my dad. So right here, I have pictures of her posing in front of my dad's clinic in China, and then as well as like her just casually working on at her job. But even though life in China felt pretty smooth, pretty okay, comfortable, life in China wasn't exactly what she wanted. My mom was the oldest child out of two. It was her and my uncle. And as a girl in China, she felt the pressure of being a female. And then as a female, she felt that her job was to basically just birth the coveted son, especially with the pressure of China's one child policy. So that just didn't feel like what she wanted. She wanted to have a big family and also to have the freedom and the access to like human rights and just by like itself feeling like she was free to be whoever she wanted to be and do whatever she wanted to do. So, unwilling to bear the pressure of the restrictions she faced in China, she decided that it was time to leave. And leaving China meant leaving behind her entire life. As shown before, the clinic, her job as an accountant, and even the village she spent for like her entire childhood, and then more family, more friends, everything that made her life like super comfortable. But she decided that it was time to take a leap of faith and move to America. So I have pictures here of my mom posing in front of Daily Plaza in Chicago. But before she actually arrived in Chicago, she landed in New York and explored, different landmarks as one would do. Times Square, Statue of Liberty. But this also didn't feel right for my mom, so she decided to move to Lansing, Michigan, which I don't think I have any pictures of here. But she was staying with a friend and trying to afford just living in America. But even though that like life was busy, she still had time moving back and forth and visiting China once in a while. And then like when she came back in America, she also had a lot of things to juggle, I guess. Oh, so I do have a picture here of my mom working at her first Chinese restaurant in Lansing, Michigan. But soon after, she moved to stay with her cousin in Chicago. So I also have a picture here of my mom at a park in Chicago on her day off. But also just to expand her horizon and open more opportunities, she took ESL at Chicago City Colleges. So right at the bottom here, I have a picture of her posing with her ESL classmates. Most of them were Polish, and this was on their field trip to Buckingham Fountain. So in Chicago, I think the ESL classes were around the early 2000s. And then this helped her build her life in Chicago. She still worked as a waitress at the time, but life was becoming gradually more stable. And she was able to bring over my dad and also my grandparents, which are her parents, to America after she saved up enough money to finally buy or at least pay the down payment for a house, which is the house that we're living in now. So she had my brother in 2006. And even like after having a child, she never gave herself a break. She just worked and worked and worked, and then had me in 2008. And then again, worked and worked. Money became pretty tight with a mortgage to pay and two kids. Never took any maternity leave, or had any sick days. So she just kept working, and my brother and I stayed home with our grandmother while she and both my dad worked more than 12 hours a day, 6 to 7 days a week. So that was just a huge sacrifice that my parents made for us. And as kids, I just saw my mom like in the morning briefly before going to school. And then like as a child, I didn't know really the depth or the complexity of the situation or the sacrifices that my parents, especially my mom, made for us. But eventually life got a little easier. Me and my brother were growing up and money became kind of looser, still tight, but looser. And this led to my mom having my little sister in 2014. So the dream of having a big family was finally achieved. And then for the first time in her journey here in America, she actually decided to take a maternity leave for about a month. And after that, life became kind of more regular, back to the usual. But that break was kind of our first sign of stability. And then, like, that itself took over 20 years to achieve. And then from 2014 to, I guess, right now, 2024, it's just been back and forth, lots of money, but getting by and having us three, her children. So I have a picture here of my basically the entire family, me, my brother, my sister, and then my mom here. I don't know if you guys can see my cursor, but she's right next to my brother, and then my dad in the back. And then also my mom works as a parent mentor coordinator at my elementary school in partnership with a nonprofit. And then she also works at a supermarket as a cashier, helping to train new employees, which many kind of share the same story. They are like first generation or like they're immigrants. And she's encouraged many people to look into city colleges, especially the ESL program, which finally helped her get on her feet. And then as for my siblings and I, she's always encouraged us to give back to our community and through volunteering or service programs, kind of help people that once kind of showed how, like, the place she was in at one point. And because of this, my brother actually recently received a full scholarship for college from the US Army ROTC. And this kind of was an extension to her dream of having kids. Not only are, we're here with the kids, but also building a life in America and achieving the dreams that she was never able to fully complete in China due to the restrictions. So I wrote my essay based on, the journey from stability in China through the chaotic transition to America, but also eventually finding the stability again. I remember writing this essay right after writing her resume to be a teacher's assistant with a specialty of like translation at my elementary school. And then it just kind of grows to show that after years of hard work, it's kind of she was climbing up the stairs almost, ascending to a new level, and then acquiring a license to teach, basically, and inspire more people with her evolution through life. Even though maybe the 20 years here have been seemingly unexciting, she has a long list of jobs which she has struggled between. And then being a student, learning English, learning sciences, American history to understand America, slowly but surely, she kind of progresses to a higher level. So right now she's working really, really hard and progressing really, really close to an associate's degree in America, which rebuilds almost her life in China, but this time with more parts to her story. So I closed out my essay by simply stating that although this was kind of an oversimplification of her journey from China to America, there was a lot of things that we can learn from it, and it is truly inspiring to see her journey through it all.
Thank you so much, Marlena. And we're going to have time to talk a little bit more about each of these essays after Matthew speaks, because Dr. Chu has prepared some very good questions for you all too. So next, we would love to hear from you, Matthew, about your essay.
Yes, of course. Let me just pull up the slide. It was kind of messy. So I decided to focus my essay not necessarily on a single person, but rather kind of a quilted history. I gave my title a part of my title was a quilted history because the person I wanted to interview originally for this essay, um, my great-grandfather, unfortunately, before I could ask him, he passed away. So that really hit hard on me. And when writing this essay, I did shed a few tears. But I took the time to bring myself closer to my grandparents, my mom, my aunts and uncles. And essentially, while this story does focus on my great-grandfather's impact on all of us, who I interviewed was a collection of many, many different people. So I listed it out as a curse, as a sacrifice, as a gift, because there are many different beginnings and pathways that the story can go. But uh, through some oversimplification, um, the story really does start in the midst of civil war. In Chinese history, between the 1920s up until the 1950s, China was embroiled in a massive civil war. And my great-grandfather was a high-ranking general of the Kuomintang, or what would become in 1949, he would have to flee to Taiwan because the communists would end up taking over the mainland. Um, and this is where the story gets a little complicated. My great-grandfather, when he fled to Taiwan, he left my where my family, the family where I come from, in the mainland in Jiangxi province. So my great grandmother would have to end up taking care of my grandfather who was left there, and would also have to take care of the grandchildren, which are my aunts and uncles and my mom. So um the picture down here that I have here is of my great grandfather in his I believe in his general outfit before he fled to Taiwan. And on this side over here, I have an entire family photo, but I guess the really important players here is my grandfather, my grandmother, who's off onto the side over here, and my mom, who's this skinny girl down here. Um, these three people's perspectives would play really, really crucial in my writing of the essay. So what is really funny is that my grandmother tends to be really, really religious, a little spiritual about a lot of things. So because of my great grandfather's affiliation with the Kuomintang, my family in China, who was left in China, did suffer a lot under the persecution of the communist government. My grandfather would actually describe to me that the moment his father left, he was basically unprotected. As a child, he had to wear those giant, massive, heavy signs that detailed his supposed crimes being affiliated with the Kuomintang, with his father, as a traitor. Uh, that would be the same with my great grandmother. And eventually that would come to my oldest uncle. Fortunately, it did die out after the 1970s. Um, but essentially, my grandmother called what this affiliation a curse, because apparently every single one of her children experienced a near death experience after after my great grandfather fled. Um, and basically, they either were almost eaten whole by a cow or suffocated under heat. Um, but nonetheless, my grandmother really resented the fact that we had this affiliation with supposedly what she called the wrong side. Um, so we had what my grandparents described as a very hard life in China, especially since pretty much the government was out to get us. Um, so where the story does transition over to my great grandfather is that after he fled to Taiwan, he tried using any means possible to get his family out of this because he knew that there would be some persecution happening because of his affiliation. But unfortunately, he wouldn't end up getting anywhere until the 1970s when the United States government ended up subsidizing old Taiwanese like generals and military to the United States for education purposes. And my great grandfather was one of those people. Um, in this picture over here, which is a little later, this is him in front of Philadelphia's Chinatown, where he eventually moved after the subsidization. And he made his way, aside from education, working in restaurants, um, trying to make as much money as possible to get our family out of China. So essentially, what his work did was create different perspectives of a single story. And one thing that I wanted to quilt together was the fact that his impact kind of led us here to America. Um, so while I did talk about my grandma's curse and how she felt that this affiliation was kind of detrimental to our family, my mom, on the other hand, who was born in the 1980s, said that she didn't necessarily agree that it was a curse. Rather, she thought it was a gift. She doesn't remember too much of her life in China, only from what she has been told by her older siblings, by her parents. Rather, she felt that this was a great opportunity to move from obscurity into a new, almost majestic fantasy land within the United States. She described to me when I was talking to her about this story that when her grandfather, my great grandfather, first decided to move our family to the US, she imagined an almost transcendent experience, especially when she got off the plane. She saw the lights off of New York City, and she described it as almost heavenly, almost a new life, a new experience. And that really contradicted with what my grandmother would eventually tell me about her perspective, because rather she thought it was almost a punishment to be taken away from her own homeland, while my mother thought this was a great new opportunity. So what ended up happening is that my mother grew up pretty much American, um, and did have a lot of conflicts with my grandmother, who stuck with her stubborn Chinese ways. Um, and how these perspectives ultimately came to me was that no matter how you saw it, as a curse, as a gift, his affiliation, his struggles, as a general, fighting for what he believed his country, fighting for his family, and making sure that we had the opportunity to escape supposed punishment and social outcasting in China for a better life. I always thought of it as a sacrifice, even with everyone's perspectives being different, because whenever I hear the story, I imagine someone who was drafted into the military, fighting for his country, losing that war, and unfortunately having to see his family pay the price because he decided to draft in the military. He he chose to fight for his country because he thought that this would elevate the status of our family if he were to come out as a top ranking general. Unfortunately, the war did not go that way, and our family fell, on off basically fell off the social ladder. Um, so why we ended up moving to the United States was a little different than what most other immigrant stories tend to be. More opportunity, uh, more more opportunity for like riches in America. Rather, it was almost forced onto us because of his affiliation. And many different perspectives from my grandmother's generation tend to be against this affiliation. My mother's generation tends to believe it a gift, but I always believed it was a sacrifice. And this is the reason why that I decided to title my essay as a Taiwanese American. I'm not from, I was not born in China. I was not born in Taiwan. I was born in the United States. My mom and my dad, they were both born in China. The thing is that my great-grandfather's impact on our family is such a crucial part to understanding the person that I am today. Is it just seems a bit lost if I were to just deny the fact that he he didn't necessarily fight for the China that you think of today. He fought for the China that you now think of Taiwan. Um, I no matter what political affiliations one may have, it's always great. It's always good to remember where your heritage came from, what country your heritage came from. And for me, that is Taiwan because my great grandfather fought for this country. My family was associated with this country, and it was the reason for this association that we moved to America. It is this association that I am here in New Jersey, that I'm here talking to you all today about this story of moving to the United States. So just Chi- calling myself a Chinese American seems a bit seems a bit that the story is almost lost in translation. Rather, I whenever asked where does your family come from? What is your ethnicity? What is your what country does your family come from? I will always say Taiwan because of this affiliation that has led my family to find success here in the United States. Thank you.
I'm going to turn it over to Patty to talk a little bit about these essays as a whole, and then we'll get into the Q&A. So Patty, I think we need to streamline a bit because we're running out of some time. So go ahead and give your comments and your and unmute.
Students, this prompt asks you to look backwards and understand your parents, and your resulting efforts are typical of many Asian American narratives by younger immigrants and American-born writers. And in fact, they resonate, I'm having sunlight behind my paper, they resonate with the writing I'm doing myself about my family. In reading these essays, we judges were able to see the process of you young writers finding your own voices while also interviewing your parents and grandparents and framing what you learned through your own perspectives. We saw that the immigrant story has a number of tropes that recur, but we also looked for essays that presented those stories in distinctive ways. For instance, Matthew Wong, as we've just heard, described how his grandmother considered his grandfather's Kuomintang service a curse because it reduced the family's resources dangerously in post-war Jiangxi province, but you view your grandfather's military service as a valued sacrifice for your country and family. Din Yu Wong, who isn't here with us, used the metaphor of a tree that bore both cherries and peaches to represent her family members' resourcefulness and adaptability. And Kesar Wong, who sent her statement, evoked the combination of memory and imagination her grandfather needed to become a paper son, person entering the country under an assumed identity. Although we appreciated essays evoking specific places or historical periods, we did our best not to favor essays addressing dramatic events only and to appreciate accounts of all kinds of experiences. In addition to generic innovation, we were impressed with essays that expressed empathy and historical awareness, which you all have done, as well as essays that recognized experiences of vulnerability, such as failure, uncertainty, and regret. For these are the emotions that often shadow stories of exceptional achievement. We appreciated that as a group, you as young writers, or your young writers finding your voices, and in some cases, your essays were not as polished, but or drew upon familiar narrative conventions, but still had a lot to say. Most of all, we appreciated the efforts you made as writers to interview your elders and to deeply understand their stories through the process of writing. And now,
So
Janelle.
yeah, so we would love to just go a little deeper for both of you. We have some questions for you, and we're going to start with Marlena, and I'll just ask Patty's. Patty's developed these questions, and Patty, would you want to share the first question with Marlena?
Oh, yes. And then we found this is such a detailed and sympathetic account of your mother's life and her efforts. Why did you choose to focus on her and say less about your father and grandmother?
Well, originally when I was writing this essay, I was trying to kind of think about what led, I guess, the family to America. And ultimately, after talking to my family members, it was really just my mom's dream and my mom's kind of dedication towards starting her own family and wanting more children, and then also focusing less on the burdens that like the burdens and restrictions of Chinese culture and Chinese policies to ultimately come to America fresh, new, no English, no experience, but fresh and new and ready to expand on her goals and really pursue them.
Those were really nice choices. How did her story influence you, especially now that you have thought about it and written about it?
Well, ultimately her dreams are basically what led to my existence. So, of course, in China, the one child policy, if she wanted a child, it would have, like, theoretically speaking, would have just been my brother, and I wouldn't be here. But furthermore, it's kind of built who I am today, not only with the like Chinese culture and customs, but also more, I guess, intangible things like I've seen how much she worked and how much she sacrificed. And I really think about her work ethic when I do things myself. And I see everything that she's done for us and all of her perseverance through all the troubles with adapting to America, which also leads me to kind of keep that in the back of my head and remember that that is what built the life I have today. And ultimately, I take those lessons and I try to kind of enforce them in my own life. So I guess overall, her story, her journey is literally what made me today.
That's really beautiful. Um, I also noticed in the written version, not so much in your oral presentation, we were struck with the metaphor of the tangyuan. So can you say a little bit more about how you chose the metaphor, and what else it means to you, or what it means to you in the essay?
Of course. So I guess in Cantonese, tongyun. For me, it's basically a comfort food. We eat it all the time, especially around the winter solstice time. Is always a great memory, and especially because me and like basically entire family, we come together and we make each and every ball, and it kind of just, you know how like each Tongyun has a different filling, and those have different tastes. And some people don't like certain ones, and some people really like that one that someone else doesn't like. So ultimately, it kind of shows the different stages and emotions and kind of caveats and ups and downs to my mom's journey. With I talked about like imperfect, like balls, cracked, circular, those just represent the hardships, but also what came out of this journey, perseverance. And then the sweet memories, or like the sad, the bitter, and the different tastes, I guess, represent the different emotions my mom felt through her journey. And ultimately, like for us too, how that one ball, it's kind of impressive how through this 20-year journey, through the transition from China to America, she still prioritizes like keeping her culture alive and everything. So it just really is inspiring, honestly, to see something from her culture from China be represented through American kind of society. And I said this before, but like the journey throughout everything.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Is the tom yum, is that something with fillings, and are they sweet or savory?
Yeah, most have like sesame or some type of peanut filling. So usually they're more sweet, but also there are some different variations, and different people like different things. But also sometimes, the filling goes bad or something goes wrong in the recipe, so that changes the taste, of course.
Yeah, I really like how this the range of flavors is like the range of experiences that your mother and your family have experienced. What a lovely metaphor.
Thank you.
So, I want to turn to Matthew also. And I think you started to answer many of these questions in your presentation, but nevertheless, I will ask you. I was struck with the skill with which you incorporated so many stories from the different generations of your family. And as you said, the stories has the subtitle of the family history as a quilt. Um, so how did you find the balance between, say, your grandmother and your mother's perspectives, which were pretty different?
Yeah, so I mean, you could kind of tell um, when interview, if you were there during the interviews between differences between my grandmother and my mother, um, definitely their perspectives were, I wouldn't just say a little different. They were very, very different. Um, there was actually one time where my mom was in the room and my grandmother was talking about her experiences, and my mom contradicted that. And they ended up a little debate over how exactly this event happened. But nonetheless, I wanted to find the balance in that they both held that the story of how we got to America um, was ultimately what led us to a better future. Both my grandmother and my mother had this one idea that no matter whether they thought coming to America was by force or by choice, was that it would ultimately lead to a much better future for their descendants, uh, me, my brother, my cousins, than what we would have had back in China. Um, so having this ideal idea in mind that that I and my generation is the result of what struggles happened in the past, and that everyone who I've interviewed believes that this was definitely for the better, because now that we have um us annoying kids, um that I held on to this idea and kind of wove it in as the overall umbrella theme of this essay. And although they do contradict each other at times, I wanted to keep it at the same almost tone, at the same kind of build up to what ultimately everyone would think after my generation was born.
So you have a nice balance between the two stories. And I really would encourage you, if you work with this story further, which I think you should, because I think you have a lot of material here, to keep those individual voices and the disagreeing points of view present, because I think that's what makes it a really interesting story. Um, you did mention that you interviewed other people. Can you say a little bit more about your other interviews?
Yeah. So although the major voices in my essay were my grandmother and my mother, I also interviewed my grandfather, and one of my uncles. And their perspectives were to mainly gauge a little bit more of the story that my grandmother or my mother may have missed within their generations. So a lot of the struggles and specific examples that may have been a bit too gruesome to put within an essay such as this one, um, really did come from my grandfather. Oftentimes he would describe um, bloody encounters, um, maybe a little bit of um, sexual violence that happened during this time. So while they were there to corroborate what my grandmother saw as struggles during her generation and what was left after my great grandfather fled to Taiwan, um, those stories I felt shouldn't have been in an essay where ultimately the end result for each of them was hope. I felt like it would be a big downer, and even when I was writing it and trying to find a way to incorporate this into it, I was a bit hesitant to do so. And my uncle, he had a much different experience leaving China than my mother. I believe he was 12 when he left China. My mom was around 4 or 6. Um, so he definitely reacted to a new life in America very differently than my mother, and he held on to more of the Chinese values than my mother. So this experience specifically really plays into the fact that he was a bit torn between whether to decide to create a new American identity and sort of forego what he had built in China, or keep the Chinese identity and kind of not really build almost like his own life in America. He did struggle because he was a first generation immigrant trying to keep his values in a country that ultimately did not understand him. He had more of the struggle than my mother because my mother pretty much grew up American. Um, to, today, well, this past year when I did interview him, he seems to have found that balance, but he does sometimes find that it is a bit difficult, especially with his children, my cousins, to kind of find the balance between how to be almost an American parent to them, but still instill in them the Chinese values that he grew up with. So while I wish to have put more perspectives in this essay, um, the main reason was word length. Um, but the other reason was that the other perspectives, while not less important, mainly corroborated what my grandmother and what my mom believed to have been the impact of my great grandfather. Of course, there are many other different perspectives of his story and their impact on their lives, but these two perspectives, I mainly resonated a lot more with what would eventually be written by the person, me, here, and my identity.
Well, thank you. That was fascinating. And I hope you have a great gift that you're able to interview these people and that they're all present. And that you're able to live with them and that you know them so well. So I hope that you will write more about your family. In fact, I would say that to Marlena also and to all our writers. Do you think we should can turn this over for question and answer now?
Yeah, if there are audience members who want to ask these young writers a question or share parts of things that resonate with you, comments on what's been said here, please take a moment to put that in the Q&A. And as we're waiting for that, we can also just continue. We have about 5 more minutes. So as we're waiting for those questions to come in, also for Matthew, that I'd love to just also ask, which is, you shared your writing with perfect strangers, right? And we've talked a little bit about this process for you. You have a lot of interesting kind of dynamics going on. You interview not in English. Is that correct? Yeah. And so you also can't share everything you've written. And this is something that's come up in the past with these very intimate moments and discussions. You can't share them in the way you've shared it with us, with family members. And I just wondered if you could say a little bit more about what it means to you to share your work with these different audiences, the kinds of different ways in which you approach sharing your work.
Marlena, do you want to go first?
Okay. Well, there's a lot that I don't know. Well, when I felt like writing my essay, it was kind of just more of a broad overview because the specifics were kind of like almost, I don't know really how to describe this, but not concrete because of the experiences, like the individual experiences themselves, which I'm not sure like my mom is comfortable yet sharing, but in general, it's just kind of like, I don't know, it really just depends on what it is and how everything went down, but also in like finding the right way to verbalize it is also kind of different in a way. I don't know if that answered the question, but that's just my take on it.
I guess I just wanted to note that writing for an extended audience and not, I guess, telling the same stories to my family, um, that so I guess many people who may have the same experience um that I have. The war in China was definitely a push factor that had many Chinese Americans, Taiwanese Americans, people from within the area fleeing the country to find refuge in the West, in the United States. Um, so sharing this story tends to be a bit painful to certain people who may have lost everything in war. And one of the things that I wanted to share with those people who may have similar experiences is that no matter how painful the story may be, um, you can always find solace in a community of others who may have had similar experiences to you. Um, I can't imagine anybody my age who may remember having a ancestor who may have been a war veteran, who may have struggled with this kind of experience. But there are definitely people out there, above my generation, in my generation, who may be silent about this experience because it may be too painful for them. My hope is that if and when people read this, that they find the peace to maybe share their perspective of the story with their family members, hoping to build that sort of connection instead of keeping it inside. So that was my hope in sharing this with a wider audience.
So we're almost out of time. Patty, do you have any last comments?
Just that it was a pleasure to read these papers, and I hope that all of you will keep writing.
And I echo that. Thank you to Marlena and Matthew and to the other young writers who entered this contest for sharing your stories, for sharing your family stories, and for sharing their stories through your words. It was really beautiful and very touching. And we also encourage you to keep on writing. Have a great night, everybody.
Thank you for coming.